Today we're going to talk about how do you go from, getting all this research done to finally synthesizing it so you could actually figure out where to go next. And maybe you're showing it to some stakeholders, maybe you're just generally figuring out what you should start working on and building. So that's what we're going to, or like what question you're going to move forward with in terms of the problem space. So did everyone get a chance to watch the video? Okay, great. So I'm going to kind of go over what was in the video, answer any questions, and then I'm also going to go through the instructions for going through research analysis in a more practical way. The video kind of just explained an overview of it, and then once we do that, I'll give you a chance in class today to basically go through that same step and that same process and synthesize your research. And there's also a book in the video, if you watched it, that one was pretty good too. Kind of dives into a little bit more in depth what we're going to be talking about today, but this is a really good starting point, base point for how you take the research and synthesize it. So let's begin. Based off what you kind of watched in the video today, after we collect a bunch of data, we typically will move into design synthesis, which is what we're going to talk about. And from what you understood, what do we do during the design synthesis phase? I'm going to throw that question back to you.
It's basically when we start to kind of organize the research data that we received and how we kind of understand it ourselves and make sense of it. This is also the fun stage where we start doing the Post-its on the
wall. Yes, designers are known for their Post-its, aren't they? Aren't we? Okay, anyone else want to talk about, I think you kind of explained it well, Brad. So basically what happens is first you got to externalize the data. Does anyone remember what we kind of talked about when we talked about externalization of the data? Or how do we do that really? I think you kind of touched on it, Brad. Yeah, go ahead.
Get it out of your mind and put it on realistic visuals so you can see it.
Yeah, and I think you said get out of your mind, which I think you also meant like instead of just thinking about it, it's percolating in there, you're like visualizing it, you bring it to the forefront. So this is a really important activity because then you start, once you see things visually, you start noticing certain things group together, you start noticing patterns, and that's what kind of leads us to our infinity mapping. And infinity mapping, it can sound a little fancy, but it's really just a way to cluster common ideas together so we can find themes within the data. So this is where we're grouping our sticky notes, or if you're not doing physical sticky notes, you could actually use a mural board, M-U-R-A-L, and you could kind of set the whole thing up digitally and use digital sticky notes to organize your information together. And when you're doing this, sometimes you're doing it in a group. I've had students that for other projects that would do it like 4 or 5 people, and then maybe one person's moving it to a grouping and the other person's like, does it go there? And then maybe there's a bit of discussion around that. Or with this project, you might just be doing it by yourself. So it's okay if you identify themes and then you start moving maybe something to another theme, or if you have a very big group of sticky notes, let's say a big cluster for your affinity map, and then you start realizing within that there's actually 2 sections. You could break it up further. So you don't just, so then you start having maybe more themes emerge. So it depends on how much information you have and how you see them starting to create patterns and themes. Then you can start moving around the groupings. And then once you've identified those themes, we'll go ahead and we'll turn those themes into insight statements. So can anyone tell me what is an insight statement? Okay. So I'll give you a bit of oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, isn't it like a collection of things, like the different data points of your observations of the users, like key things that they said or key insights about the project?
Yeah, so I think that it is definitely that, but specifically for this process of synthesizing, once you have all those themes, and I'll show you in a moment, like a guided project format, once you have all those themes identified, you'll take a theme, and so example theme is like, let me think of an example here. I'm actually going to show it to you in a moment. But let's just say there's a theme of limited purchases, right? So let's just say I talked to a bunch of people and I noticed people were saying like when they are, let's see, let's choose a different example. Okay, I'm just going to use I was going to use the Flutter example, but I'm just going to use an example of someone like riding the train. Maybe you're interviewing tourists and you're trying to see what their experience is when riding the train in a new country, and maybe you had a bunch of people saying like, "Oh, it's so hard to know when to get off at the right stop. I'm always confused. I don't know when's the right time," and you had a lot of data points around that. Maybe a theme could be system status, right, or currently traveling status. And then from there, you would take that theme and you would create insight statements. And those insight statements are created from the theme. So that statement could be a sentence or two that represents a perspective or a possibility that we can derive from our theme. So for example, if the theme was like system status, an insight statement could be, tourists want to know when to get off at their stop so they can get off like safely and quickly, right? So it's kind of like written out as a whole sentence. Well, like a lot of times when you're creating themes, they could be more like labels and not as defined. So another example for an insight statement on a research study for parental controls on screen time, because a lot of parents struggle with, their kids always want to use the apps and use phones and iPads and all that. So if a parent was trying to control screen time for kids, that insight statement could be, parents want to reduce screen time usage for kids, or you might say parents prefer having parental control options. And then from there, we would take that statement and turn it into a how might we question. And I think we did this a couple days ago too. And how might we question is just taking that insight and turning it into a research question so we can start giving us some fuel for brainstorming. So I'm going to use that parent example. If our insight for, like doing interviews around screen time and kids using the technology too much, and we realized a lot of parents were saying like, I want to be able to, if they use too much time on the screen, I want to be able to stop that or set the limit or whatnot. And if that insight statement was parents want to reduce screen time usage for kids, now the how might we statement could be, how might we create an experience for parents that's easy to add time limits. So it's just turning it into a question. We're saying who's it for? Who are we trying to help? We're trying to help parents. And what are we trying to help them do? Add time limits. So it's just, and making it easier process. So just turns that into a question. At this point, it's really important to note that you aren't coming up with a solution, but instead you're just reframing it in a way that will help us generate ideas later. So it goes from all your data, a lot of raw data, to clustering it together, right? Your affinity maps are clustering in order to get to identify themes. From those themes, you're like, okay, what does this theme overall say? This is a statement. And then how do you turn that insight statement into a how might we question? So I'm going to actually show you an example right now of kind of walking through this process. So I'm going to share my screen, just one moment. Actually, before I show you, okay, it's fine. I'm gonna do one by one. So example, we were doing this for the Flutter app. I think you could all see my screen right now. And then maybe you had a bunch of questions that you asked your users, which a lot of you went ahead and did. In this example, you may have had each user have their own kind of set of questions, but here we just summarized it. So we asked, like, what does your typical day look like? And then we color coded it. So this is one user interview, orange is a second user interview, green's a third user interview. And so we can just quickly see all this information. Can you name apps and websites you use for your entertainment? How often do you use your phone? How much free time do you have? What's your primary messaging application, et cetera, et cetera. As you can see, some interviews, there was quite much of a longer response. Some were quick and straight to the point. So we kind of get through all of this, or maybe it wasn't an interview. Maybe it was like the surveys that you put together. Whatever data that is, In this case, it's an interview, so kind of color coded it based off of who was the person who shared that user information. And then this is what it would kind of look like. Oh, just 1 second. So again, you could use Post-its. Here I'm showing you a visual that's digital, and some of you might choose to do that as well. So this visual here, these are the data points, right? As you can see, the red, still kind of same color coding, the orange and the green. You could choose to do this if it's more specific to who said what. But otherwise, use this Twitter, Slack message, use this Spotify, Slack, YouTube. You start kind of putting all your cards there, all the different things people are telling you. And at this point, it's just a lot of information, right? There's no, how do we organize this? How do we group this? It's kind of just all over the place. And this is where we'll get into our next stage, where you're actually, and I'm just going to show you here. Oh, give me 1 second. I'm going to show you them now labeled together. Okay. You can see my screen now. So this is where, you know, we might have looked at some of the, I'm going to just zoom in for you so you can see. We might have looked at some of these and said, okay, this all talks about time. Busy all day, nonstop busy, using internet for time. We might say, okay, these all seem to time management as a whole, which might be a little bit outside the scope of just messaging. So this is where it might be too broad, but I think if you tie it to messaging, then that can definitely be part of it. So for example, you said, maybe you could say like, how might we respect our users' time, or how might we help our users keep their apps like organized? But then again, that's like very specific to having with the apps. So were you thinking like more broad in terms of like planning who they talk to and when, Brad?
Yeah, some kind of integration, like a reminder system for
Okay.
more important messages, or a reminder system to something that they haven't responded to in a certain span of time. Kind of like how Google does that with emails. They'll actually send you a nudge, is what they call it, when something
Okay.
sounds like it has like a time frame within it. They'll
Mm-hmm.
send you a nudge, say like, this hasn't been responded to in 3 days. Do you want to respond? Something
Hmm.
along those.
Okay. Yeah. That could definitely work. Okay, good. Let's try another one. Let's do, okay, the statement of our users are open to paying for features that enhance their experience. And I'll drop this in the chat too, so you can just look at it again to everyone. Let's try this statement. Our users are open to paying for features that enhance their experience. What are some how might we statements we could generate?
I mean, I feel like it's super, this one kind of sounds easy, but wouldn't it be like, how might we provide features that would enhance our users' experience and give them not give them the option, but I'm missing a word here, but there's a word for it.
It
Like,
could definitely be that. I think that it doesn't have to be longer than that. It could just be like,
okay.
how do we help them, as you said, how do we create features that will enhance their experience? Does anyone else want to have something else that comes to mind for this?
I would say, how might we entice users to pay for premium features?
Okay. Yeah. So when we say how might we entice them, like the goal of the project is to really get them interested in the marketing. So it's interesting how words, right, could really yeah, like really like play a big role essentially in the way we write these.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else would like to chime in as well if you think of something different? Okay, I'm going to put another statement. It's how might we differentiate the focus our app How might we differentiate the focus for our app experience from from the competition? There's a 4 missing. I'll rewrite it. How might we focus? Oh, sorry, I gave you the how might we statement. Okay, this is the insight statement. Our users each our users use each app for a specific purpose. I feel like I kind of gave you a hint with when I dropped the how might we. So basically, I think I'll chime in here. So if this insight statement was our users use each app for a specific purpose, we're understanding that they don't really have a loyalty to one, right? Because each of them are providing them with a different experience, different features. Maybe it could even be on the contact level, right? Like they have certain people added. For example, maybe I message people I don't have their phone number on Messenger because it's tied to Facebook. Well, if I have your phone number, I could easily message you on like WhatsApp or iMessage. So that could be a piece of or rationale why. Or it could be like one has stickers, or one has gifts, or one has FaceTime, or I'm internationally calling, etc. So each basically competitor, and sometimes it's your competitor analysis, each one essentially is created for a different purpose. So maybe the how might we here could be how might we differentiate the focus for our app experience from the competition, because we want to be different from what's out there, because people are already using each app for a different reason. Maybe another one could even be like, how might we incorporate all the most popular common features of the other apps into our app, because then maybe we'll have a highly likelihood of people using it, right? So there's different ways to approach this how might we question. But ultimately, by creating it, you're getting your team aligned, you're getting everyone on board in terms of what's the challenge at hand. What are you looking to do? And once you articulate that, you're able to kind of move forward. For example, sometimes how might we statements are too broad, or sometimes they're too narrow. So this is where you kind of really wordsmith to make sure you're using the words that are going to be very clear to anyone reading this in terms of like how to tackle the challenge. For example, I think I mentioned this last time too, but for example, if you're tackling the issue of food waste, if we said, how might we decrease food waste, that's way too broad. There's like probably hundreds of ways to do that. But if from our statements, when we maybe interviewed families, that's the example I used, and we realized that families were constantly, throwing out food, we might say, how might we help families better reuse their food? Or how might we help families, even if I say give away their food? Then that's a totally different goal, because now I'm trying to figure out who do they give it to? What are the things that happens when you give away food? Is there any like legal implications or health implications versus how do we help them reuse it? Okay, so this is where the how might we statement really ties into like the goals you're trying to accomplish. Is there any questions around the how might we statements? Or anything you have for me so far on synthesis?
Do the how might we, do those get put into post-its as well and put up onto like a board, or is that just something kind of like that's specifically for when you're creating your oh, I can't think of the word right now.
When you're creating your like
insight statements. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Oh, no, it's fine. You're good. It's up to you. I know some people that like to after write sometimes it doesn't fit the insight statement on the post. You might need one or two, or you need those bigger, wider ones. But you could definitely put it on the board. You could write it on the board. Some people do whiteboards, so then they have the stickies on the whiteboard and they're able to write around it. That could work too, but it doesn't have to go with the stickies. Like you can kind of write it separately if you like. Yeah. It's up to you for that. Anything else that comes to mind?
So like looking at the whole process, it looks like the hardest part is just like the clustering. If you're not really experiencing that, you know, and you have so much data, even if you like put thousands of post-its on the wall, it's just like it takes some kind of like experienced eye to like maybe I just don't know if there are any ways that you can help yourself to categorize those in those themes, because it seems like when you have a theme, it's easy to like kind of like, you know, rewrite it. But I mean, the part like it's kind of like for me like it's overwhelming, like oh my gosh, I have all the data, and it's like, all right, like what goes with what? I mean, the possibilities seems like depends what, I mean, I don't know, how do you decide like what?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's two tips I can give on this. One is that sometimes if you already know that, like by reading the data like beforehand, you know that there might be some themes, you could pre-create those themes, like put those themes down first and start as a preliminary organization, put the post-its under those main kind of themes and then divide it further. So it gives you like a starting point versus like a whole just, you know, board of post-it notes. Another way some people like to do it too is break up the post-its by pains, motivations, and behaviors. So if someone talked about things they did, that would go under behaviors. So for example, I'm riding a bike because I have to commute. I take the bike, I, you know, grab the lock, I put it somewhere, I like things that I'm doing, I like pack my helmet and extra clothes, etc. A motivation could be like why I do it. So I ride my bike to work because it's faster. It makes me feel more energetic or athletic, etc. So that's kind of like your motivation for doing it, or it's faster than public transportation. It's faster than driving. And then pain points would be things that are just like obstructions or annoyances or kind of just things that stand in the way of you task, which is like commuting with your bike. So maybe it's like I get sweaty when I arrive at work, or you know, sometimes cars just try and cut me off, or there isn't enough bike lanes, or I feel like the tracks in the road, it could hurt my bike, whatever that might be, like pain points. Sometimes people divide them by that. So they're just like more aware of what they, you know, what people are saying. And then from there, create the themes. So yeah, think about how much data you have. It feels overwhelming. Are there some predetermined themes you could create? And then you can always recategorize, right? Like that's the thing about stickies. You can just lift them off and put them somewhere else. However, when you're doing it with a group, sometimes it's kind of, you could start off with those pre-categories, but at the same time, you don't want people to just assume those are the only options and then not create new themes, right? Because everyone will be like, oh, there's only 3 buckets here. Like everything should go under that. So again, it's a good starting point, but depending who you're doing it with, is it like a design workshop that you're holding? Is it just with your team, or is it yourself? That could help you with the process a little bit more. And also I would say when you do the data points, try not to make them like 2-3 sentences of what was said. You want really short post-its, really like bullet points almost in terms of your data. So you could, it's less of like, okay, this is very detailed, where does it go? You just want like small, like short bullet points. And you could always reference, imagine you pick a theme and then you're looking at all these data points. You could always reference the interviews or the surveys if there's more like granular or detailed information you want clarity on. But it'll make the exercise a bit easier.
And these data points are coming from like our surveys and our interviews and all of that jazz, right?
Yes. You got it. Okay. So once you've actually done this, so just to review it again, you know, you've done all this research, you put all this data maybe on Post-it notes or on digital Post-it notes, you're creating some themes by affinity mapping, clustering things that you see have commonalities to each other. And then from there, you've created these themes, you've written these themes out as insight statements. So they're full articulated statements, and then you turn them into questions that will fuel your brainstorming, your how might we questions. From there, sometimes you might want to prioritize your how might we questions in terms of what you think could be like a more like higher rated kind of pain point in terms of how important it is to kind of work on that versus one maybe more of a nice to have. And then a lot of times, because you're sharing this with people and you're trying to get information from others, or even it's like a group activity, you might create a report. So I'm actually going to screen share again to show you our example of a report that you could create to basically summarize everything you've done in this process. Okay, you can all see my screen. So this is an example of a report for Flutter Messenger. And when it comes to reports, there's so many ways to put together reports. Like some companies might have predetermined templates they want you to use. Some other places might just be free-flowing, just do whatever you like. But generally speaking, this could be, you want to keep the reports concise, have the appendix to actually show all the information, like all the research, like the surveys, the interviews, what you said, what they said. That could be in an appendix, but then in the report, you want it to be something that's bite-sized, that you can quickly walk through, and it gives a really good understanding of the process you went through. So over here, for this research interview questions are noted. Participants, so what did you do? We conducted 3 interviews. One was male, 2 female. Sometimes you can go even detailed than this. Here's just like what the age group and also whether they're female or male. But sometimes you could actually go into a little bit more detail, like create like little personas or little customer demographics to say who you interviewed. And then discoveries. So these are your main points. We found out our users are constantly busy between parenting, work, educational responsibilities. Found their parents have little time for much else. Our users use multiple messaging apps, each of them for a distinct purpose. These are kind of pulling from our insight statements. The messaging apps that our users choose are based on mixed convenience and necessity. If it's not for these 2 things, there's very little chance our users will be interested in anything else. And finally, our users are open to making purchases within applications, and the reason they choose to make purchases is mixed. So it's identifying that, yes, they would do it, but now why would they do it? To enhance functionality or, of an already desirable experience. And then considerations and next steps. How might we fill the need for convenience and accessibility? How will users discover our app? How will we entice users to try the app? How is our app different from other similar messaging apps? And how will we monetize our app while still providing users with convenience? So these are kind of things that weren't highlighted or pulled from the interviews, but they're questions that now the team's saying like, okay, if we were to go ahead and build something, or even if there's certain things we didn't catch or ask for in our interview process, these are the other questions we might need to kind of take a stab at. Maybe it's doing interviews, maybe it's doing surveys, or maybe it's just creating the product and then at that point in time talking to those users again. So this is what a report could look like. Again, in the appendix, you could have a screenshot of you doing like the affinity diagram. You could even have something similar to this, like all the data points. You could even have the interviews exactly as they happened, but you want to have that probably in another section and have a summarization. Any questions on this? Also, another thing to keep in mind is like time. So like other people on your team might be busy, they have a lot to go through. So how can you summarize it and communicate it in a very clear manner? Demystify all the maybe complex parts of it and just make it very simple and easy to approach. Now, imagine you're the designer of the research. You have put this together. I can now take it and say, okay, I kind of have a feel for, what our users are looking for, and then what are the highlights of that interview to move forward in terms of the design. And I'll also take in mind like the competitive analysis that we've done so far to help with that. Okay. I'm going to actually get you to go ahead and try this as well. If there's any questions, just drop it in the chat or just interrupt me and we'll answer them. But what you're going to do today as a challenge is you're going to create a presentation that showcases the information I discussed in an engaging report in Google Slides. So you'll have 20 minutes to complete this exercise. When you're finished, I'll ask some of you to share your report with the class as if we're all stakeholders at your company. So This is the report. I'm going to drop it in Slack. It's just the one that I showed you for Flutter. Just one moment. I'm dropping it in UXPT4. So that's the report. And then what you're going to do is create a presentation to showcase this information to stakeholders. It's up to you how you want to do it. You want to add some visuals, if you want to break it up, however you like, but create it into like an actual slide deck in 20 minutes. How does that sound?
So we have to use Google Slides, right? We can't use like Keynote or anything?
You could use, preferably Google Slides because it's easy for you to collaborate on it, right? Like if two of you are in the working on it together. But otherwise, yeah, you could use Keynote. But it'll just be easier, I think, to collaborate if you're using Google Slides.
All right.
Yeah, but you could. If you both want to do Keynote and like quickly divide it up and then merge it together, send it over, that could work too. Just for like ease of use, I was mentioning that. So I'm going to put you in groups right now. I'll give you 20 minutes. Put something together as if you were going to actually present this, and then I'll probably have 1 or 2 groups, or we might have some extra time, maybe 2 or 3 groups present your findings.
Is there like a key time frame we should be looking for the presentation?
What, sorry?
Like a key time, like for like how long the presentation should be?
Yeah, I would say like maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Or
okay.
less.
I didn't know if you wanted it like briefer or like, because we were talking about like, you know, if we want to make it as efficient as possible, should it be as quick as we can with relaying the information, or?
Yeah, I would say I'll leave it up to you. Like I probably shouldn't be more than 5 minutes, but think about as long as you can get all that report information there, as long as that's being communicated, it's up to you how efficient you think you can do it. Okay, is there another question on this before I put you into rooms?
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Kind of a general question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have breaks at all during lecture?
Yes. The reason we haven't done it the last a couple times is because you went into like a little like group session. Yeah. So what I can do is, would you guys like to have a break maybe before we get into this or after? I'll ask.
I just wanted to make some tea really quick.
I would love to go get some water. So
okay, let's do that. Let's take a 10-minute break for 10 minutes. I'll put a little timer on and then we'll start, and I'll put you in breakout rooms right away.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Okay, everyone, let's get started again. Oh, sorry, 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.
Hey, Emery.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Just had a quick question, just kind of like to recap. So we're just supposed to make a presentation, like we're going to be presenting this to stakeholders who are going to decide if they want to create this or not, or
Correct.
it's being created and they're the ones whose input matters at this point.
Yeah, just present it as if like they have tasked you to go and do this research, and now you're presenting your findings to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. I'm just waiting till everyone's back. You have like 15 seconds, and then I have the rooms ready. Ola, Seth, and Wyatt, you're going to be in one just because there's 3 of you. It's going to be together.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
No problem.
Oh,
Okay. Oh. All right. Oh, wait. No, actually, Catherine, you're back. Great. So let's,
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, my computer went to sleep while I was gone. So.
Oh, no worries. You're good. I just wanted to put you in a room. That's why. Okay, perfect. So that way. Okay. So Catherine and White, you're together. Okay, let's do this. So I don't know where's everyone? Okay, there. Yeah. So basically, I dropped it in Slack. That's the research document, and you're going to see in 20 minutes if you can come up with some kind of way to present it. Up to you if you want to throw in some photos, just like the way you want to divide the pages, etc. You're going to be in groups of 2, so Bradley and Joas, Kathy and Lee, Ola and Seth, and Catherine and Wyatt. And I will put a timer. I would say time yourselves too, because there's no way for me to show you the timer earlier in the breakout room. But I'll send a message when you have 5 minutes left. Okay. You should get invitations now to join the rooms.
We
Who
all
would like
know that if your conversion rates get quiet.
Yes. Anyone needs some kind of conversion metrics? We'll contact Wyatt. Okay, who would like to showcase? We'll probably have one or two people show the presentation to us, all stakeholders, at this company called, I don't know, Flutter's parent company. Who would like to go? Excuse me. Okay, fine. I'll pick someone. Okay, we'll have Seth. And who's in your group, Seth?
Ola.
Okay, Seth and Ola. Go for it.
Okay, Ola she was working on the presentation, so she would have to share her screen.
Okay, go ahead. You guys could share.
And we were a little lost in the beginning as far as what we were trying to accomplish.
That's this one. Yeah, we didn't get too far. Do you want to start? I guess.
And then after Seth and Ola, let's have, who else? Kathy, whose team were you on? Who are you with?
I was with Lee.
Lee? Okay, Kathy and Lee. You guys go together.
Do you want to talk, Seth?
Yeah, but you have to share your screen.
I didn't share my screen yet.
No.
Okay. I'll try to do that.
Okay. So, oh well, it's kind of strange not having control over those.
Okay, so like, tell me when to press.
So this is a presentation for the Flutter messaging app. You can go ahead and hit the button. We got our information based off of interviews from ages 25 to 30. And we discovered, you can hit the button, that everyone's super busy these days. So we need to try and help with that. Yeah, I guess you can hit the button. People are using all kinds of different apps, so we need to entice them to use Flutter. I don't know if we have anything.
And that's it. Yes, I mean we were kind of we're kind of confused on what it's supposed to be about, and not seeing an example like how it's supposed to look like was kind of hard because like we both want to go in different directions a little bit. I was going all about like we have to kind of be like a storytelling and just like give them, you know, like a good story example from our findings when we were doing the contextual, but I just not do inquiry, not being part of like doing that, just reading it. It just kind of made it like really hard to like really get into it and just read raw data and like come up with some enticing presentation, like just I don't know. And
okay.
I don't know.
Okay, well, yeah. So I think maybe time wasn't on your side, but at least you I noticed you were trying to attempt to like have some bullet points and some visuals and to kind of get that across. I would say like even worst case scenario, if you have a lot of text on your screen, how can you as a team like articulate what's happening, right? So even if it's just like you're walking through the quick, right, be able to deliver. So you mentioned a little bit about the users that you interviewed. Maybe having some like demographic information would be nice. Like you remember there's a female, male, they were within the ages of 25 to 30. When we interviewed them, we started noticing these themes emerged, and then you can like kind of highlight them on the screen. From this, we wrote some main statements and And then finally, like your how might we, and like even what you're really kind of telling the stakeholders, us on the call, what you want to kind of pursue further now, like your next step kind of thing.
So it has to kind of be a mixture of like some data, but throw some data there, like the metric, like statistics, like who we interview, and then also like the how may we.
Yeah, just like exactly what's in the report, but it's just like how would you break it up into a presentation?
Oh.
Yeah, like the report I shared with you, like you could just take that, but then just make it presentation format. That could work. You don't have to add like competitive analysis and all the other pieces and parts for this one.
Would it be possible for Catherine and I to present?
Yeah.
After?
Go ahead. Yes.
Or do you
Okay.
want us to go? Kathy, do you guys want to do yours first?
No, by all means, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and
Oh.
if you want, do you want to stream?
Sorry,
or I
hold
can?
on.
No, you're good. You're good.
Oh man. This is, sorry.
So it's you can just press the present if you want to do the slides. It's to the left of the yellow button on the top right.
Oh.
It says present. I know it's so different than what I'm used to. Okay, so we are here today to present our research analysis for the Flutter Messenger app. We have conducted some surveys and we have some results we want to share to our stakeholders. So that way we can create an application that is more effective in getting our users' attention, but also making it more enjoyable for them, which of course means that we're going to have a more productive app. So a little intro to our interviews is that our participants, we had 3 of them, were all between the ages of 25 and 30, and we had 1 male and 2 females. And we wanted to discover a couple pieces of information in regards to how they were using the internet and apps that they use, but also what preferences they had in Messenger applications and why they used them. And in addition, any sort of key features and benefits that they had with these particular applications. We also wanted to know what perspectives they had on paid features. And we also wanted some insight onto some things maybe that they enjoyed more on some applications, but also some things that they thought needed improvement, especially in regards to even some competitors. So that way we can kind of get an edge on them. And we have some key discoveries that we made. We had about a 16 to 20 question interview. And we found out that there's a lot going on in each of their lives. Our users are constantly busy, and whether they're parenting or going through education or going through work or responsibilities, they don't have much time to use their devices as much as they want. And because of that, they probably found apps that have multiple purposes. They're using multiple messaging apps, and each one is for a different use, whether it's messaging friends or something work related. We know that they're using different apps for different reasons.
Come on.
So why are they picking these apps in particular? Well, it really depends on one of 2 things. Typically, we want it to either be convenient or it's necessary. So if something provides more convenience than what they already have, that is already catching their attention. But at the same time, if something is a necessity and they need to have it for something related to work, or they need it just for basic functions in their life, they'll pick that app over what they have. And what they consider within each of those apps in terms of purchases will range. So the general idea is that users will consider purchasing something within an application if it's going to enhance what's already there. So we don't want to give them an experience that at the raw skeleton form of it is not enjoyable and then offer some sort of premium that's going to incentivize just the premium. We want to give them something that from the beginning is desirable. So when we are considering the premium membership or premium subscription, we want them to feel like they're already getting enough beforehand and that it is a very nice cherry on top of a great, delicious chocolate molten lava cake. And what's next? Well, in terms of what's next, we have some questions to consider in terms of developing further research. Like, how might we fill the need for convenience and accessibility? How are they going to discover and find our app? And how are we going to attract the users to actually even visit our application, that's half the battle. How are we going to be different from other messaging apps, and what can we provide that others don't? We want to have an edge because, as we mentioned, if they already have an app that they're doing something with, they're not going to want to get another one unless there's some sort of benefit or some sort of one-up on it. And how are we going to do all of this but still monetize our app? How can we make this application convenient for others, but also convenient for our stakeholders that are making a huge investment within our Flutter application?
Okay.
So that's what we have.
Nice work. Good stuff, guys. You guys got through it. So I think questions from the stakeholders, anything that you think they could have clarified a little bit more that you thought on their presentation? Okay. I have I have one. I know it wasn't per se in the actual report, but like, let's just say if you were trying to add a little bit more to it, it would be nice to say like our team now moving forward, like we're going to focus on this how might we statement, because like you presented a lot. So as a stakeholder, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's like a lot here. Like what's, and you mentioned the next steps, which were great, like more research needs to get done. But even that how might we statement could be interesting. Like I know it wasn't in the actual research doc, but just for the future, tying it in. And I noticed your team also added what a little bit of an introduction and like why you went out to do the research. So good job in adding that in as well. Really orients us, like the stakeholders or your listeners, into like what you're trying to accomplish. So nice work, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, Kathy, your team's next. Kath and Lee.
Okay. Lee, did you want to present or would you like me to?
Doesn't matter. Sorry, we didn't go over anything for this presentation. So,
Okay, I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead. All right.
Nice gif. Let's present. It's beside the yellow.
Over there. Sorry. It's okay. So these are our findings of the Flutter messaging app. Our research findings. The following are key discoveries and productivity and organization. Our users are constantly busy, and between parenting, work, and educational responsibilities, we found that our participants have little time for much else. So just to give you a story or a baseline, we found that when we interviewed Bob, a 28-year-old single dad, his typical day consisted of a quick cup of coffee, feed and walk the dog, make sure the kids eat breakfast, get them prepared for school, drop them off, and then off to work for him. After an 8-hour shift, he would pick up the kids from sports practice, rush home to make dinner. This insight has led us to ask some of the following how might we statements. How might we feel the need for convenience and accessibility? Our users, we need to hone in on the purpose, and our users use multiple messaging apps, but they use each of them for a distinct purpose. For example, one messaging app might be used for messaging friends, while another is for work purposes. When interviewing Bob again, we found that he put 3 messaging apps to use. One app for keeping up with his friends and family, one he used for messages to only family members, and one to message his grandmother in Chile. How will users discover our app? How will we entice users to try our app? Convenience, of course. We found that upon interviewing all 3 users, each pointed out that none of the apps they were using really allowed them full control of customizing the interface, of customizing the messaging interface in a way that is most logical to them. So that's something that we found while interviewing one of our users. How is our app different from other similar messaging apps? Is a how might we statement that we had. Purchases, functionality, and experience. Our users are open to making purchases within applications, And the reasons they choose to make purchases is mixed. Oftentimes, a purchase is made to enhance the functionality of an already desirable experience. And a 30-year-old single working woman spends $10 a month on a messaging app in order to halt ads. How will we monetize our app while still providing users with convenience? And last but not least, what's next? Considerations and next steps. How might we fill the need for convenience and accessibility? And just recapping some of those points that we went through. And that is our presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy and Lee. Questions to the stakeholders, anything with this? Do you have further questions for Kathy and Lee? Or thoughts on the presentation?
I only have one thing to say. As cool as the little GIFs were, they kind of drew my attention to them, and I kind of missed some of the words of the presentation because that's just how that goes. But they were cool.
That cat is literally how I feel at work.
Thank you, Seth.
At work.
I think everyone resonated with this cat that you had. Okay, so a couple things. I would say that, yes, some of your screens were a little too text heavy because you had like the header and then you had like some body copy text and some bullet points and the GIF that like everyone's eyes were on. So maybe breaking up the slides a little bit more, or even obviously if you had more time, animation. So you start off with like, this is the title, and then the text appears as you go through it. One thing I did like about your presentation, which I thought really added to what you were saying, is you mentioned you did interviews, but you mentioned, was it Bob and then there was another person? I forgot their names now.
Yeah, Bob and Ann. We didn't have the third person in there quite yet, but
okay, yeah. So what's interesting is we're going to get into this next week where we talk about personas and creating them, and what like a proto persona is as well. Of course, with interviews, you don't want to say that your findings and what you're planning to do with the product is based on one person, right? But what it seemed like is there was a general consensus in your presentation, and then you pulled out an excerpt of like one of the users, like say interviews, say Anne. We actually don't know.
It kind of started out with Bob, and then it just like popped up randomly with Anne.
Exactly. So it was kind of nice to see, like, especially with Bob, it kind of felt like it was, I wasn't sure if it was a proto persona, where a proto persona is where you take all your user interviews and you create, you take the characteristics and make a person out of it. You like kind of talk about. Yeah, yes, exactly. But with N, it kind of felt like that was one of the, like that was an excerpt from like maybe an interview, like quotes that someone said, and you like tied it in to make it more believable and real. So that was a nice touch as well. Right, good work. Good stuff. Okay, that is all for us going through the presentations. Unless someone's like burning to show theirs, then by all means, I think we could we could fit one more in. But if not, I'm going to introduce the assignment. You have some time to begin working on it. Also, just a reminder, so today is Wednesday, but you will also be working on your sprint challenge this week because we're done a module. And then next class, which would be Tuesday, we start a new module. So basically your sprint project you're going to be working on this on your 5th day is going to be a culmination of, you know, the assumptions we talked about from doing interviews to what we're talking about today, like synthesizing it all the way to putting a presentation together.
So I was, Anne-Marie, I'm sorry, I was looking through the sprint, the challenge, and it mentioned using Milanote.
Yes, it's what I just used. It's this one.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
okay.
So you don't have to. You could use Miro, but Milanote is, I guess it's free and you can kind of copy the same design.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I'm going to introduce the assignment that you're going to work on today. It's research analysis, very similar to what we have done here. You're going to be doing this for the Newsy, the news aggregator website, which you've kind of been building off on the last couple assignments. So externalize your findings. You could use an online whiteboarding tool. So as I mentioned earlier, there's like Miro, Mural, MURAL, or you could just use this one that I just showed you, which was Millinote. Or if you like, sometimes you could just do it with in Sketch. Even if you get like fake stickies, you can kind of do it that way. But I think doing it in one of these tools will be faster because you can actually move things around. So externalize your findings. Each post-it should represent one observation, really important. So don't try and like put 3 on one, just like one observation per post-it on data point. Infinity map, so start looking for common patterns and relationships and start forming clusters with themes. If you have so many outliers, like there could be a theme by itself just on the side, but try and get your overall themes. Finally, take those themes and write insight statements. So you could have 2 to 3 insights per theme. It doesn't have to just be one insight statement per theme. There might be one point about X, and then maybe there's 2 other points. That's fine. Turn those insights into opportunities by creating how might we statements. So for your how might we statements, you might take 2 or 3 insights and put together a how might we statement, or you might take one insight and create its own how might we statement. I'll leave it up to you depending on how detailed those insights are. And then once you've done that, create a 1-page user research summary incorporating the lessons we learned in class. So this is the summary that I showed you earlier. Where did it go? Yes. So this was longer. This was like a 2-page because this had the questions on there, but you don't necessarily have to add the questions. It's just more a summary of the overall piece, maybe like how many people who you interviewed. And then if you stretch goal, if you have time, create a PowerPoint, Keynote, or Google Slides presentation from your research summary. Similar to what we just did right now, put something together in this case that you're actually presenting it to a team or to stakeholders. Submit a Google Doc or PDF with an image of your affinity map, so screenshot that, a link to your insights and how might we statements, and a link to your research summary. Any questions you have for me on this assignment?
So I'm pretty new to Google Forms. Is there a way to get my data or whoever took the survey?
Like the raw data?
Right.
Yeah, let me see.
Right.
Yeah, there is a way. Hold on, let me just open it up and see if I have something open to show you. So if you go to, I'm not sure if it's going to work because I actually don't have a real form. Okay, let me show you. So if you go to your Google form that you've created, let's see if this will work, and you actually click on responses, normally you'll have these 3 dots, and oops, let me see if it's this. Yeah, you can download responses as CSV file. This is actually like an Excel sheet file. So you have Excel on your computer, or if you want to use Google Sheets, it'll create them in columns, and then it'll be easier to pull the text from it. That's one way to do that. Does that answer your question, Lee, on how to? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure. Any other questions on the assignment?
And so we're using the data from the survey as well as the interview, right, for the affinity map and
So you mean what you've done so far? So I think, yeah, last time you did an interview, you're gonna pull from that data. And you did a survey as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. They were both, I'm trying to remember if they were both from UZ. 1 second, let me just double check.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you could pull both of those, yeah. Okay, I'm going to introduce the next thing as well, which is your sprint, just so I can answer any questions. Make sure it's clear. So give me 1 second, I'm just opening this up. Okay. So this is your sprint challenge that you're going to work on after the assignment. And you're going to be doing it for Kea Wallet. So we're actually going to be using Kea Wallet for sprint challenges going forward in Unit 1. So it really builds off each other. The brief is similar to what you've seen before. The day we were looking at briefs and kind of finding the missing pieces. So it's going to look like this. It's a money management app. Talks about the offering of the app and the audience to whom it's for. So let's take a look at that. And then you're going to do your assumptions analysis. So when you look at the actual brief, what assumptions are we making? Trying to identify as many as 10 assumptions regarding the product. And then remember that 2x2 matrix we did with like known, unknown, high risk, low risk. Make a ranked list of the assumptions with high risk and known assumptions at the top. Then generate some research questions and hypothesis based on those assumptions. Organize the research questions into categories of research methods. So all the methods we talked about: surveys, interviews, contextual inquiries, focus groups. There's a couple more. There's not coming to mind right now. Just take a look at the lecture that we had about maybe 4 classes ago, and you could pick kind of one you think is best suited for this. But then this is where it's a little different. Instead of actually, so you'll kind of organize, these are the research questions, and this is the best way I would go about doing research for them. But then you take the questions you've grouped into the interview method, and then write 5 or 6 additional interview questions you could use to help validate your hypothesis. So you're actually going to be doing not a survey for this. You're going to be doing an interview. Create an interview script using this following template that we used last time, user research interview guide. And then conduct and record 1 interview with your identified participant from earlier in the week. If you're unable to conduct an interview with a participant, you may pair up with another student, but only as a last resort. So we're only asking for 1 interview. There's no survey being sent out or anything like that. But if you want to do more, feel free to, but we're just asking for that 1. In part 3, extract all user interview notes to Milanote, which is what we did I showed you today. Create an infinity map, create insight statements, how might we statements, and then a report that highlights the questions, participants, key discoveries, and considerations and next steps. So very similar to the report I shared with you today. The only difference is this report's only going to have 1 set of like data, right? We had three different interviews. We had 3 different interviewees. This one's just going to have 1. So it might be, when you do your infinity mapping, it might be a little bit, maybe only a couple of like 2 themes or so. Then you're going to create a Google Doc that includes your assumptions, your 4-quadrant assumptions ranking matrix, interview guide, interview recording, affinity map, and as a stretch goal, link to the 1-page research report. After you've finished, put a white on red lambda emoji in your cohort Slack channel. Okay, anything I can clarify here? I know some of it you might be like, oh yeah, how was the step for this? And if you kind of go back to, I think we started this, not this week, last week, we covered like the assumptions, the risk, so it might just be a bit of a refresher for you, but is there anything that isn't clear that I could clarify for this assignment?
I have one quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
It says, conduct and record 1 interview with your identified participant from earlier in the week. Does it necessarily have to be the specific person that we did the interview for Newsies with, or can we use a different participant?
You could use a different person, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I just want
just like worst case scenario, if you didn't have anyone else, you could just see if you could use the same person.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I have a question too, Anne-Marie.
Sure.
Can you just clarify the the 3rd bullet point in the submission interview guide?
It's this one. So the script is in this guide. I'll just open it up 1 second. So it's basically like
okay.
Yeah, this.
The synopsis, the little summary. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Here we called it 2 things. We called it a script, but if you click on it, it's actually the guide.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. This says the interview recording. So do we need the actual like audio video, or is this another transcript?
for the recording, you could just do an audio recording. That's fine. It doesn't have to be video. And if you do the transcript, you could just add it like in the appendix, but it's not required. We're not asking you for it this time.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. If anything else comes up, because I have a feeling maybe you're doing it, you're like, wait a minute, I have a question here. Just message us on Slack or message your TL and we'll be able to answer that. But otherwise, that's all for this evening. I'm going to let you get a bit of a start on, we have about 30 minutes, but you can get a start on the presentation, on the assignment that's for today and your 5th day, and then also the sprint challenge. And then once we come back, we're on Tuesday, we're actually going to move from discovery to identifying and organizing problems.
We're off next week, correct?
Are you off? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Oh, no.
I was like, you keep saying Tuesday. I'm like, 2 Tuesdays, right?
2 Tuesdays. Oh, well, then it'll be a week, so I think it'll be Monday then. Yes, you're right. You guys are off next week, so, enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone in the United States, and then we'll be back the week after. Hopefully you don't forget everything by then, but we'll be back the week after, and then we'll get into identifying and organizing problems. So this is where we talk about personas, journey maps, user flows. It starts getting a bit more visual as well. Yeah. It really, we get to kind of like dive into more of the design kind of process. So it'll be fun. And then after that, you're basically done unit 1 and you get into build week, which is normally 2 weeks from, if the calendar's still, from what I saw last, you're going to start build week and then you continue, like we have the kind of holiday break, and then you continue into the new year build week, the 2nd week. And then from there, you've kind of moved on to unit 2, which gets a little bit more visual design, kind of the stuff a lot of you are waiting for, the UI. You're going to move into that. So far we've done career basics, communication, stakeholder management, research planning, contextual research, secondary research, and analysis. And then we'll dive into this last module once you're back from Thanksgiving.
Just something really fast.
Yes.
It might, on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, you guys should be on the lookout if you can for, you can get like monitors for really cheap.
Oh, great.
And getting a monitor is like the single best thing that I've done to like help my workflow. So that way you have so much real estate to be working and looking and communicating and typing and getting your pictures and moving. It's just really convenient. You can find them for really cheap on those 2 days. So keep it on the lookout.
Yes, I second that. Like, especially when you're doing design work, if you can have like a bigger screen. A lot of times I use, like right now I'm using a 13-inch Mac, but normally when I'm like into like the weeds of UI work, I use my big screen because it really does make a difference. So if that's something that you could potentially get, or if you already have that, that's great. One other thing I would recommend too, since we're talking, maybe getting a deal on Black Friday, is a mouse. So as you get into like more UI and you're moving little pixels across and making things smaller and bigger, right now in the course, it doesn't maybe matter as much because it's a lot more research and text and writing, but I highly recommend you have a mouse. You could use your trackpad, but this kind of motion on the trackpad, like making things, it's gonna, like, at least for me, I actually had my hand like get tendinitis because of that, and I had to really switch to a proper mouse. And it doesn't mean you need to get the Apple mouse or anything like that. Like even a Logitech Pro works really well. That way you're able to move your whole arm versus just moving parts of your fingers. Also, it'll make you faster when it comes to like shortcuts and things like that, and working in UI. So if you are looking to make a little purchase, I'd highly recommend a mouse. If you have one, then you're on track. Great. Okay, everyone, that's all for this evening.
With the UX daily challenges, just
yes,
that if anyone's been having issues with them, a mouse has definitely saved my.
Yes, totally agree. I actually can't do UI work at all now if I don't have a mouse. It primarily also because my hand gets because of that like injury gets really stiff, but it really makes a difference. And you may not notice it in the first like 2, 3, 4, 5 months, but do design for a couple years, and we joke, we're like, there's a shelf life for us designers. because you know your arm, and you sometimes get neck pain if your head isn't straight at the computer. So little things to keep in mind. Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight. I think y'all did great in terms of the presentation. I know the time was a factor, so it's okay. Seth and Ola, next time we'll be able to have a little bit more time. But otherwise, if you have any questions, working on your assignment, please just send a message on Slack, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And have an awesome Thanksgiving. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. See
Good
you.
night.
Good night.